Virtue or vice? Like virtuous, vicely, vices. It says vice like it. Virtual.
Vicious.
Is it vicious? Really? Are you sure? Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody, and welcome.
Welcome.
Hope you're doing well.
Hope you're doing well.
Stop. Okay. Are you kidding me?
Kidding me?
Okay, today we're talking about virtue and vice. Vicious. I'm Father Brandon.
I'm not Father Brandon. I'm Anna McCarty, and you're watching another youth ministry segment. What?
Morality, part 3.
Hopefully you watched 1 and 2.
If you didn't,
if not,
it's fine.
stop. Go watch them, and then watch this.
We have differing
Just watch
opinions
them all
about
day.
one.
It's not okay.
So quick recap.
Agreed.
Part 1 was about morality is not just a bunch of rules, it's clinging to Christ, the very person of Christ.
Part 2 of morality goes more into like what is morality, what is moral act, and how can the acts that we do lead us to Christ. So we looked at object, intent, and circumstance, and looking at an action and then deciding is that moral or not moral, because we have a call to do that.
Exactly. Right. And today we're going to talk about habits. Part 3, habits. Habits, patterns of action, right? We all do it, right? We do something over and over, and we just kind of do it automatically, right? And we know that habits can be good or they can be bad, all right?
I just thought of one, but I'm not going to. Okay, so give us an example of a good habit, Father Brandon.
Okay, good habit. All right, so in seminary, we had to make our beds every morning. And so I made my bed every morning. And now
awesome.
I continue to make my bed every morning. I don't even think about it. I just do it.
Okay.
Anna, could you give us an example of how you pick your nose?
I was going to say a bad habit might be picking your nose. Okay, but a bad habit regarding in the morning making your bed, maybe when you set your alarm.
When you set your alarm.
I have a bad habit of... Okay, you too. You just admitted to this too.
Okay, fine.
I like to snooze. So I'll even set my alarm like for 5 in the morning when I want to get up at 7, and then usually I get up at around 7:30, or whatever.
You're losing so much sleep.
That's a bad habit because that can be slothfulness, and even greediness, wanting to stay in my bed and be warm and cozy.
Yeah. And I'm in the same boat. I might make my bed every morning, but not until I've hit snooze a few times.
So there we go. Good habit versus a bad habit. So the good habit instills virtue in us, and then a bad habit can lead to vice.
Yeah. And so when we're talking about morality, good habits we call virtue. And the Catechism of the Catholic Church defines virtue as a habitual and firm disposition to do the good, right? And so it kind of differs from just a good habit in like the worldly sense in that it's spiritual, so we have the help of grace, but also we want to do the good, right? It's not virtuous unless you want to do it, and we give our best. So we give it our all, our whole being, body and soul. And finally, the last one that I heard, and I thought was really cool, is virtue is creative. So we're always finding creative ways to do the good, creative ways to not lie or to do the right thing. Whatever it might be, we're creative about it.
That's awesome. So some virtues. There are 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. And then there are 3 theological virtues: faith, hope, and charity. So those, like you mentioned, are spiritual. So we ask for God to give us those virtues, but then we are called to act and to form good habits that lead us to those virtues. So if we ask God for the grace for them, we receive them, but then we have to live them out.
Exactly. And so just as there are good habits, there are also bad habits that oppose virtue. And so there are vices. Vices could be defined as basically the opposite of a virtue. There are habitual and firm dispositions that make us or lead us to do bad things. All right? And so we could list them off as pride, envy, greed, wrath, lust, gluttony, and sloth, also known as laziness.
Sloth.
And so these things oppose virtue, and they're bad habits.
So just like we see that there were 7 virtues, there are those 7 vices, and each virtue combats that vice. So that's really cool. Like the Lord gives us these things and says, pray for this, work on this, and for example, if you're struggling with pride, then a way to combat it is through working on virtue, and being generous and loving others.
And so we can look at virtues and we can recognize that there's kind of 2 parts to it. Like they're both human and divine, in a sense, just like Jesus is, right, in the
Mm-hmm.
Bible, right? And so there's a human aspect in which we can do good things and fight for virtue. But then there's also the divine part where God gives us the grace to continue the fight, right? So what can we do in a human way to grow in virtue? Well, first off, do it, all right? As we always say, fake it till you make it. Just start doing good things and doing them often and with all your being, and eventually you'll become virtuous, right?
It all
just takes
begins
practice.
with that initial starting point, and then having the fortitude and having the courage to keep going. Even if it's a little uncomfortable at first, or you're tempted to not keep going. Just like that slow, like you just got to start.
Yeah.
Make your bed.
And then, of course, asking for grace. That's obviously the obvious things.
Very obvious.
Sacraments, of course. Other devotionals like the Rosary, etc. Sacramentals like images. But also, I think a really powerful thing is just recognizing what you need and asking for it. God says He will give us all the things that we need, to grow in holiness. And so, if you're feeling like, maybe at school and, you're in a locker room or whatever, some situation where somebody's kind of like giving the faith a hard time or giving somebody a hard time, like somebody's bullying somebody, and you need to be the one to stop it, and you are scared because nobody wants to oppose the bully, right? And so you can say, all right, Lord, I need some fortitude. Let's go. And God will give you that actual grace to act in a good way. And that's what true virtue is.
Yeah, and it's crazy because if you ask for like the virtue of faith, the Lord will give it to you. You literally just have to ask for it, and He will give you that grace. We have to live it out, and we have to live out our faith, like you mentioned. But if you ask for the grace, the Lord gives you the grace, and then it's up to you to use that grace to be virtuous. So those are just some practical ways to look at how to be a moral person and how to live out morality, and look at our actions and pray for the Lord to give us the grace to be virtuous.
Because we want to be virtuous, right?
And heaven.
And happy.
Woo!
All right, see you guys.
Bye.
Take care.